Moving on, let's talk about the California homeless industrial complex as it has been branded by some. So a lot of the information I'm going to be referencing from this segment is going to be taken from Michael Schellenberger, both his Twitter account and his Substack, because he is a person, he's a public intellectual type who wrote some books on climate change, mainly Apocalypse Never, and most recently he's written a book called San Francisco, which I need to get around to reading, talking about why progressives ruin cities. And he seems to be an ex-progressive type who's seen the actual outcomes of the utter lunacy that they propose and decided that he wants to stand against it. And I really respect him for that, and he's currently running for governor in the November gubernatorial elections in California.
Do you know if he stands a chance? Probably not.
He's running as an independent, so I doubt it, but it's the good that he is bringing a lot of the information that he is to light to just show what an absolute cesspit California is and why exactly it is the way that it is. And good luck to him. I hope that he can unseat Gavin Newsom. I mean, Larry Elder didn't manage it last year, but we can always keep our fingers crossed for these situations, given that Gavin Newsom seems to be literally evil. I think when I see images of him, he looks genuinely evil. He looks like someone who's like the last boss of a video game, who will just, nano machine's son, except much less awesome.
He'll lock down the entire state and then go for an expensive dinner. That's what he'll do.
That is exactly what he'll do. And before we go any further, I'll just point out, Josh and I had a premium podcast come out yesterday talking about how the left does not understand economics, just like the left does not understand a lot of things. I think we might have to make a series of this, to be honest. And the next one might be left doesn't understand culture, or maybe the left doesn't understand homelessness, because if anything from this segment is going to make it clear, they definitely do not understand homelessness.
Well, most homelessness is drug-related, isn't it, a lot of the time? And then if you look behind the drug-related nature of it, then it's normally mental health-related. And then the mental health stuff is normally related to family and upbringing. So you can trace it all the way back to they didn't have a stable childhood, more or less.
Basically, but California is particularly bad at encouraging this. We've all seen the images and videos of people walking down the street in LA, for instance, and just seeing rows and rows of tents of people sleeping rough. And it's much the same in San Francisco. And I don't even really want to mention some of the
It amazed
footage
me the
that
first
I've seen.
time I saw it. I was just like, I thought LA and places like that were meant to be, upmarket and nice. And then I saw all these tents. And I mean, I like going camping and stuff, but not to that extent.
Yeah, I mean, for a little while, there's been some discontent within LA, even from people within Hollywood. Like, one of my favorite films, Mulholland Drive, is secretly about LA as a complete s-hole. Don't go there. Women don't try and go to Hollywood. They will just destroy you. And it was before Harvey Weinstein or anything like that had come out, so it was a very timely message, to be honest, and more people should have listened. But anyway, let's carry on. So here's the thread that I got a lot of this information from, that I saw him putting this forwards, where he's talking about many people who call themselves homeless advocates, because that's a thing you get in California, and I would imagine across a lot of other progressive states in America, are not. Rather, they are ideologues who oppose getting mentally ill and drug-addicted people the help that they need, and they are often more motivated by hatred of modern society than by compassion for people in need. And he quote tweets this tweet from Kevin Dahlgren, which if we move over to the next one, I can read, because he's talking about an actual experience he had, where in 2021 we were working with a man deep into his addiction. He called and requested help. Activists physically blocked us from helping. A few days later, he died of an OD. Not one of the activists showed up to his vigil. That's why I call it the homeless industrial complex, which is just a horrible situation to be in. If you're this person who obviously needs help, if you're in that situation, you probably don't want to accept help, but you need help. And these people are actively helping this person to end his life, basically. Because apparently that's better than submitting to the system, man.
Capitalism wants to get you off of heroin, therefore we're going to keep you on it, yeah.
Yeah, this is what Karl Marx wanted. Probably.
Yeah, that's why I used that opiate of the masses analogy.
Yeah, it was actually encouragement.
I think that was him anyway, it probably isn't.
And other people have responded to Schellenberger's original Twitter thread, saying this guy said he used to be a lawyer for the mentally ill, and when he was visiting them in hospitals, he was often accosted by advocates screaming at me that my job was to get them freed and back on the streets, regardless of their condition. So, they could still be in the middle of an overdose, and their position is that you should be getting him on the street. So instead of overdosing in a hospital, he can overdose under the stars, like he obviously truly wants to be the case. Absolutely ridiculous. And there is such a performative nature to this kind of activism, as far as I see it, because it is not activism for the other. It's not activism on their behalf, really. It's activism to make yourself feel good because you're living up to whatever twisted principles that you may have. And I completely hate this sort of thing. And Schellenberger linked this article from The Atlantic. Shockingly enough, it's a decent article, appropriately titled, How San Francisco Became a Failed City. And there's quite a lot of interesting information in here. I'll read through some of it just to illustrate the situations that I'm talking about and how it is that the city got here. So the person, this Nellie Bowles, starts off talking about their own experiences in San Francisco growing up, and I assume Nellie is a woman, so I'm going to say she. I learned young that it was impolite to point when a naked man walked passed by, groceries in hand. If someone wanted to travel by unicycle, like a clown, or be a white person with dreadlocks, like a clown, or raise a child communally among a group of gays, or live on a boat, or start a ridiculous-sounding company, that was just fine. Between the bead curtains of my aunt's house, I learned that you had to let your strangeness breathe. And these are all things that, yes, you are able to do, I suppose, but you can see immediately how it's setting some pretty terrible cultural standards for behaviour within the city. I mean, recently Carl and I covered Matt Walsh's What is a Woman. Have you seen it yet?
No, I saw the first half an hour and then I had to do something else,
well,
but I am going to finish it.
You should watch the rest of it.
I enjoyed what I watched.
There is a part of that which we chose not to show any clips of when we were covering the film because I thought it would be inappropriate and nobody would want to see that, where Walsh goes to San Francisco and speaks to a man who's just naked on the side of the street, and Matt Walsh is like, do you not think this is inappropriate? And the man's just like, listen, man, I grew up around naked people, and I turned out just fine. I mean, just look at me, just standing naked on the side of the road in San Francisco, not really doing anything. You know, there's nothing damaging about this kind of behaviour. It's ridiculous, and you can see how this complete throwing away of any standards has led to San Francisco as it is now. I'll carry on. Once when I was very little, a homeless man grabbed me by the hair, lifting me into the air for a moment before the guy just dropped me and my dad yells. For years, I told anyone who would listen that I'd been kidnapped, but every compromise San Francisco demanded was worth it. Doesn't sound it to me.
I was kidnapped, but it was worth it.
Yep, this homeless man abused me, but goddamn, have you seen the beautiful architecture? It's all worth it in the end, guys.
That must be so unpleasant to be picked up by your hair.
Especially as a child, yeah, that would be awful.
Well,
I mean, any point,
age,
yeah. Sorry, but they carry on. Yesterday, San Francisco voters decided to turn their district attorney Chaser Bowden, or I'll just say Bowden, out of office. They did it because he didn't seem to care that he was making the citizens of our city miserable in service of an ideology that made sense everywhere, but in reality. I wouldn't even say outside of reality it makes sense. It's just completely illogical. It's not just about Bowden, though. There's a sense that on everything from housing to schools, San Francisco has lost the plot. The progressive leaders have been LARPing left-wing values instead of working to create a livable city.
Did they actually say that in this Atlantic article?
Yes.
Called them LARPers.
Yes, basically.
Someone's getting fired.
Many San Franciscans have had enough. And, you know, it's terrible that it's had to get to this point for people to finally realise, hold up, all these crazy, progressive, altruistic ideas are not working. They're in fact making everything worse and ruining everything. At least they've finally got there. You know, at least there's that.
Only about 50 years too late, but...
got there eventually. On a cold, sunny day not too long ago, I went to see the city's new Tenderloin Centre for drug addicts on Market Street. It's downtown, an open-air chain-link enclosure in what used to be a public plaza. On the sidewalks all around it, people are lying on the ground, twitching. There's a free mobile shower, laundry, and a bathroom station emblazoned with the words dignity on the wheels, because this sounds like a dignified situation.
Is that an ironic
No, I think
title?
I think these people legitimately believe that, don't you see the dignity in what we're seeing here? No, I don't. And you shouldn't either. A young man is lying next to it, stoned, his shirt riding up, his face puffy and sunburned, but enough about Josh. Inside the enclosure, Services are doled out, food, medical care, clean syringes, referrals for houses, is basically a safe space to shoot up. The city government says it's trying to help, but from the outside, what it looks like is young people being eased into death on the sidewalk, surrounded by half-eaten boxed lunches, stepping over people's bodies, blurring my eyes to not see a dull needle jabbing and jabbing again between toes. It cautioned me. I'd got used to the idea that some people just want to live like that. I was even a little bit defensive of it. Hey, it's America. It's your choice. And I know that America was founded on values of freedom and liberty, but I don't think this is kind of what the founding fathers had in mind for what people would choose to do.
I don't remember the amendment that was just like, you have a right to be a smackhead and lie on the street.
I mean, technically, I suppose you do, as long as you're not hurting anybody else. It's just, why would you want to? Also, there's the idea that for me, that all of these public roads being owned by the government helps to encourage this sort of stuff. Because if it was like a private road or something, whoever owned it, you could just get them to clear off. I'll hire my private security to point guns at you until you leave me alone. That's the true American dream right there. A couple of years ago, one of my friends saw a man staggering down the street, bleeding. And this is not a nice little story here. She recognised him as someone who regularly slept outside in the neighbourhood and called 911. Paramedics and police arrived and began treating him, but members of a homeless advocacy group noticed and intervened. They told the man that he didn't have to get into the ambulance and that he had the right to refuse treatment. So that's what he did. The paramedics left, the activists left. The man sat on the sidewalk alone, still bleeding. A few months later, he died about a block away. And that's just an awful sort of story to hear. And it's the fact that, yes, these people have probably got themselves into a situation through drug addiction, through behavioural problems where they are on the street, but people are trying to help them. You can still turn yourself around when you're in a situation like this, potentially, but these homeless advocacy groups are actively intervening in those sorts of measures, which is just terrible. These people are complicit.
Yeah, I don't understand what runs through their minds. When someone's bleeding, you're just like, yeah, you don't have to get in that ambulance, you know.
Yeah,
like,
don't worry about it, man.
What's the worst that can happen? You could die, but, you know.
But then you'll be really free. Isn't everyone truly the most free when they're dead? I mean, that's the sort of
the
logic.
Environmentalist position, yeah.
I mean, basically, the anti-natalist position, yeah. I used to tell myself that San Francisco's politics were wacky, but the city was really trying to be good. So even the author of this article was coping so hard back in the day. But the reality is that with the smartest minds, questionable, and so much money and the very best of intentions, San Francisco became a cruel city. It became so dogmatically progressive that maintaining the purity of the politics required accepting or at least ignoring devastating results. And this does sound like dystopian to me. And it's the fact that the elected officials who are behind all of these progressive policies, they don't have to walk the streets if they don't want to. And if they do walk the streets, they can just bring a retinue of security with them. They don't actually have to live in the city the same as everyone else does. They don't have to experience this. It's very easy.
They live in a nice, safe area.
If you're going to die on the streets, San Francisco is not a bad place to do it. What a ringing advertisement. The fog keeps things temperate. There's nowhere in the world with more beautiful views. City workers and volunteers bring you food and blankets, needles and tents. Doctors come to see how the fentanyl is progressing and to make sure that the rest of you is all right as you go. So there is a thing where people... Josh, I know that you and Hugo in the past on a Contemplations talked about the drug war and how unsuccessful it is and how decriminalising drugs could potentially help some of the issues that are brought up by the drug war. But there is a massive difference, wouldn't you say, between just decriminalising drugs and leaving people to it and actively helping people to take drugs, which is essentially what this is.
I also have a bit more of a moderate position on it in that I don't think that opiates should ever be legal to have because they're just so addictive. And I mean, it's one of the receptors in your brain, the opiate receptors, that is most prone to reinforcing behavior. So if you want to become addicted to a substance, an opiate is a very easy one for that to happen to. So you could argue that there's not really much in the way of recreation. Sure, it could be used in a medical setting, but beyond that, I don't think it really should be available.
No, I certainly don't think that any sort of community should be encouraging that kind of behaviour. And once again, when you abandon any sort of standards of behaviour in a city like San Francisco, this is what's going to happen, because if you don't set a standard, everybody's going to do the absolute minimum. And if you're in a situation where, for instance, you can be encouraged to come to a city because of welfare and such, where they're just going to actively help you to be a drug addict, that's what you're going to do. That's absolutely what you are going to do. And just to carry on, I'll skip through a little bit of what I've got here. So San Francisco saw 92 drug deaths in 2015. There were 700 in 2020. By way of comparison, that year, 261 San Franciscans died of COVID. So, I mean, shows the priorities, doesn't it? These are the parables of a sort of progressive libertarian nihilism. The left libertarian types, the bad libertarian types, of the belief that any intervention has to be imposed on a vulnerable person is so fundamentally flawed and problematic that the best thing to do is nothing at all. Anyone offended by the sight of the suffering is just judging someone who's having a mental health episode, and any liberal who judges that the state can and should take control of anyone who is in the throes of drugs and psychosis is basically a Republican. If and when the vulnerable person dies, that was his choice. And in San Francisco, we congratulate ourselves on being very accepting of that choice. There's a lot more to this article, and it is actually quite well written and well researched, so I'd recommend you check it out. But to go back to Schellenberger, we can go over to his Substack, where he actually spoke to a homeless insider for more information on this, and I assume he did this while he's researching his book. And I'll just read through a little bit of this as well, because it's very insightful to tell you. And I would say that this sort of stuff is not just specific to San Francisco. This will be the same sort of things that are being encouraged in California, probably in Seattle, in Portland.
Yeah, I saw a video over the weekend of someone going down a street in Philadelphia, and it looked like Sodom and Gomorrah. It was just people draped over stuff everywhere. It was unbelievable. It is
terrible.
It looked like Taxi Driver on acid, pretty much, when he's driving through the streets and all the degeneracy, but it was amped up to 11.
You can understand how someone could develop real nihilistic tendencies having to experience that sort of thing all day. So it's no wonder that so many of the progressives just abandon hope when they see, whether they accept it or not, the consequences of their terrible ideas and their terrible policies and their terrible ideology, as far as I'm concerned. So I'll just read through a little bit of this. So the main progressive approach for addressing homelessness, not just in San Francisco, but in progressive cities around the nation, is housing first, which is the notion that taxpayers should give, no questions asked, apartment units to anyone who says they are homeless and asks for one. What actually works to reduce the addiction that forces many people onto the streets is making housing contingent on abstinence. But Housing First advocates oppose contingency management, as it's called, because they say housing is a right and should not be conditioned upon behaviour change. Now, housing is not a right. Housing relies on the labour of others to maintain and build the property in the first place. So if you have to rely on somebody else, it's not a right, it's an entitlement. As far as I'm concerned, rights are something that you're born with, and most people aren't born with a property portfolio. Well, most people.
I wish.
I certainly wish.
Yeah,
perhaps
my parents need to pull their fingers out.
Yeah, perhaps the Hiltons, but if you're lucky enough to be a Hilton, hit me up, because there's no way I'm affording property anytime soon. One of the claims made by the defenders of the open drug scenes is that people who live in them are mostly locals who are priced out of their homes and apartments and decided to pitch a tent on the street. In San Francisco, his book, I cite a significant body of evidence to show that this is false, and that many people come to San Francisco from around the US for the city's unusually high cash welfare benefits, free housing, and tolerance of open drug scenes. What a surprise that the welfare state, as ever, is the root of all evils in the world. Abolish it. Abolish it, America. That's all you need to do. Just get rid of welfare and lots of problems will be solved immediately.
Whatever you say about Ayn Rand, when she was saying in the 1950s that welfare would be the death of America,
she was absolutely right. Founding fathers would be spinning in their graves to see something like welfare passed in America. I'll just carry on. So what San Francisco and other progressive cities are doing isn't working. People in these encampments, according to the insider, have food brought to them, porta potties brought to them, and all they need to do is put drugs in their arm all day. They get really sick and they die. Portugal didn't make it so you do whatever they want. The consequences of your action there are treatment driven, but there are consequences. Here, there are no consequences, and so we make it worse. The main reason that homelessness is so much worse in progressive West Coast cities is because progressives hotly oppose efforts by cities to close the open drug scenes and move addicts into shelters and rehabs. And these progressives, of course, are the same people occupying official places within the local government.
Aren't they the same progressives that are just, whenever there is a crime, they're just like, no to the prison industrial complex, we want rehabilitation. But when it comes to drug addiction, which is
a prison of its own.
Yeah, I mean, you could
to
argue.
sound poetic about it.
Well, of course it is. I mean, it's all that they can think about being addicted. It's probably worse than being in prison, I would imagine. And yeah, they're not giving them the same standards because they're a useful political tool. It's a similar thing with Black Lives Matter and actual black people dying of gang violence. They don't care about that. It doesn't achieve their political aims.
It is terrible, and it shows me once again that the Austrians are right, that self-interest is what drives everybody. It's just that for a lot of people, for the progressives, I would say the self-interest of confirming their own prejudices and biases, that being that I am a good person, I'm on the right side of history, yada, 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 is what drives people. And that not all self-interest is the same, sadly. By blocking the closing of open drug scenes, which is referred to as clearing an encampment, people in need of help don't get it. The San Francisco Coalition on Homelessness recently, in July 2021, protested an encampment clearing where a woman was pregnant, the insider told me. As soon as everybody left, the woman went into a shelter after having been on the streets for 3 months. She went indoors. It's like, what are you fighting for? The right of this person to stay on private property and be pregnant? Because obviously being indoors in a shelter is probably much safer for a woman who is pregnant than being out on the streets. And I'll just finish off here by just quoting this last bit where the most influential homeless advocate in San Francisco and perhaps the United States as a whole is the head of the San Francisco Coalition on Homelessness, Jennifer Friedenbach. Over the last 3 decades, Friedenbach has taken control over San Francisco's homelessness budget, which is in the multiple millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, I'd imagine, and other policies. She blocks the closure of open drug scenes, calls people who disagree with her fascists and racists, and organises protests at the home of politicians. So, pretty typical leftist tactics, sadly, but unlike other tactics, which you could even say maybe they think are benefiting somebody, like against the genocide of trans people and such, this is just advocating to keep homeless people on the street, and I don't see anything positive with that whatsoever. So, in the gubernatorial races coming up in November, California, just remember that these are the problems with your state. Many of you are probably already aware of this who are watching, but if you are in the cities, if you have always voted progressive before, please consider voting for somebody else, because this will not just help you, this will help the actual most vulnerable people in your cities actually get some help. So keep that in mind. Thanks for watching this segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters. If you enjoyed that and would like to find more, you can subscribe and check out our premium content at lotuseaters.com. For instance, there's been a recent Contemplations, the newest one, What Makes Good Art Part 2, between Josh and John. If you're interested in following Josh on social media, you can find him on Getter at Josh_firm. Thank you and goodbye.